Hello, and welcome back to Hope is Kindled, where we explore the great stories that teach us how to endure, how to forgive, and how to hope. Today we set sail into the storm, The Tempest by William Shakespeare, the bard's final solo play and one of his most mysterious, tender farewells to the world. Written around 1611, The Tempest opens with chaos, thunder, waves, and frightened sailors. But the true storm is not in the sea. It is within the soul of Prospero, the exiled Duke of Milan, a magician scholar who conjures the tempest to bring his enemies to the island that has been both his prison and his sanctuary. Every storm in the Tempest mirrors an inner conflict. Prospero's tempest is not just weather, it is trauma, resentment, and unhealed grief unleashed upon the world. In psychological terms, Prospero represents the conscious mind, controlled, intelligent, but burdened by memory. The island, meanwhile, is the subconscious, wild, dreamlike, filled with spirits, monsters, and forgotten emotions. Caliban embodies the shadow, the primal, angry part of the self that resents control. Ariel, the airy spirit, is the imagination, free, creative, yearning to rise. Together, they form a portrait of the human psyche trying to integrate its fragments after pain. This is Shakespeare's genius. He turns the landscape into a map of the human condition. The storm is the mind breaking open, and the calm that follows is the slow rediscovery of peace. It's hard not to hear Shakespeare himself in Prospero's voice when he says,
"Our revels now are ended. These our actors, as I foretold you, were all spirits, and are melted into air, into thin air."
That single phrase, into thin air, was born here and has since entered every corner of our language. In that speech, Prospero acknowledges that every creation, every illusion, even every life, must fade. But the beauty lies in knowing it was. There is gratitude in the goodbye. It's the same grace we find in Doctor Who when the Doctor regenerates, letting go of one life to make room for another. In Prospero's final act, when he breaks his staff and drowns his book, we see Shakespeare laying down his pen, saying farewell to the magic that made him immortal. Historically, The Tempest was written during the dawn of exploration and colonialism. The brave new world Miranda marvels at is the same age that sent ships across the Atlantic, often bringing exploitation and conquest. Prospero's dominion over Caliban can be read as an allegory for imperial control, the colonizer civilizing and enslaving the other. Yet Shakespeare gives Caliban poetry, pain, and a voice that refuses to die.
"Be not afeard, the isle is full of noises, sounds, and sweet airs, that give delight and hurt not."
This is the voice of the oppressed, aware, beautiful, and enduring. It reminds us that even in servitude, the human spirit dreams. By the end, Prospero does something extraordinary. He forgives. He tells his betrayers,
"The rarer action is in virtue than in vengeance."
Forgiveness becomes the play's truest magic, stronger than storms, stronger than revenge. In its structure, The Tempest feels strangely modern, part science fiction, part psychological dreamscape. Prospero is a man of knowledge isolated by his intellect, much like Doc Brown in Back to the Future. Another creator who bends time and nature in the name of understanding. But while Doc's DeLorean hurtles through time, Prospero's magic rewinds emotion. He engineers a reunion, not through technology, but through empathy, through the deliberate choice to release control. And like Doctor Who, The Tempest suggests that knowledge without compassion is empty. When Prospero sets Ariel free, it's the same liberation the Doctor offers his companions, to live fully without fear. Both Prospero and the Doctor wield immense power, but their greatest acts are moments of letting go, forgiveness, surrender, and trust in the goodness of others. Shakespeare's language in The Tempest shimmers like light on water. It moves between thunder and lullaby, the crash of the storm and the hush of wonder. Consider Miranda's words upon seeing humankind anew.
"O wonder, how many goodly creatures are there here! How beauteous mankind is! O brave new world, that has such people in't."
It's an innocent hope, and one that Aldous Huxley would later twist into irony for his novel Brave New World. But in Shakespeare, the phrase is sincere, a cry of astonishment that beauty still exists after chaos. And Ariel's song,
Full fathom 5 thy father lies of his bones are coral made,
is one of the most haunting poems in the English language. It reminds us that transformation is constant. Even death becomes art. Even grief gives rise to beauty. What, then, does the Tempest teach us about being human? That mastery over the world is meaningless without mastery of the self. That imagination can heal, and that mercy can end any storm. That no matter how far we drift from the mainland of others, we can still find our way home through understanding, through forgiveness, through learning. Psychologically, Prospero's journey is the reconciliation of the ego and the shadow, intellect and instinct, justice and mercy. Historically, it is England's reflection on power, empire, and art. Spiritually, it is a meditation on release. And emotionally, it is the story of all creators, all dreamers, all those who once built worlds of their own, and must one day let them go. The hope of the Tempest lies not in escape, but in return. When the storm ends, the island quiets. Ariel sings one last song. Prospero forgives. And in that silence, Shakespeare's last great spell is complete. Because hope, like magic, is an act of will. 400 years after Shakespeare laid down his quill, the Tempest still speaks to us, not as an artifact, but as a living frequency. Every generation finds its own Prospero, the weary maker, the dreamer who learns to forgive. In literature, its echoes are everywhere. Mary Shelley's Frankenstein carries Prospero's ghost, a creator who reaches too far and suffers the cost of his own brilliance. In J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan, Neverland is a gentler version of Prospero's island, a place between reality and dream, where innocence and imagination wrestle for control. And in The Lord of the Rings, when Gandalf surrenders the ring and sails into the West, he performs the same ritual of release, the same acceptance that true wisdom lies not in domination, but in knowing when to let go. But perhaps nowhere does the Tempest spirit shine brighter than in modern myth, in the stories that fuse science, art, and longing. We have already mentioned Doctor Who, and we have already likened Doc Brown to Prospero. Doc Brown's lightning and Prospero's storm are the same, both forces of chaos guided by intellect, love, and redemption. Even in Star Trek, we can feel Ariel's voice in the stars, that yearning for freedom, for discovery, for hope beyond the known. Captain Picard's quiet wisdom, his devotion to learning and empathy, carries the same truth, that humanity's highest calling is not conquest, but understanding. Historically, the Tempest also changed the course of art. It introduced the first true magician-scientist archetype, long before science fiction had a name. It redefined how theater could portray the mind itself, as landscape, as weather, as cosmos. And as England turned its gaze outward toward empire, Shakespeare turned inward, asking what it means to be civilized, to be powerful, to be kind. Prospero's Island is the stage of the human soul, but it's also a mirror for civilization itself, reflecting the eternal tension between mastery and mercy. And that question, that moral storm, has never truly ended. When we return to the Tempest now, after centuries of noise and progress and change, it feels almost prophetic. In a world obsessed with control, Shakespeare reminds us that surrender is sacred. In a time of endless distraction, he shows us that imagination still has the power to heal. And in a culture that often mistakes power for strength, he teaches us that real strength is the courage to forgive. Every artist who's ever stood before a blank page or empty stage has felt what Prospero feels, that ache between mastery and release. Every scientist, teacher, parent, and dreamer who's tried to shape a better world has known the same question. When do I hold on, and when do I let go? In the end, the Tempest answers with grace. You learn, you forgive, you begin again. And that, perhaps, is the most human magic of all. Thank you for joining me on this voyage through the Tempest. If you find yourself in the midst of your own storm, remember that even Prospero's Tempest ended in peace. When the world feels uncertain, let your knowledge be your compass and your kindness be your light. Because hope, like magic, is never lost. It simply changes form. It moves from the wand to the heart, from the stage to the stars. Good journey.